Thank you so much. The people behind the camera, you're doing a great job. I really, really want to thank God for you. And I pray that God surely blesses you abundantly. You're welcome. You who is watching, you're welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for following and liking. You make me happy. Thank you. My name is Joy, and it's yet another day. We are going to share. We are continuing still your mentality about service and how you handle the customers, the people that God has given you to work with, to deal with, to relate with. And today we are going to be talking about promises. Promises in customer care. I want to make this statement clear. Do not make promises that you're not going to fulfill to this customer. Do not put yourself in a position which is going to, at the end of the day, tie you down or make you look like a liar or make you look like incompetent or make you look like, why did I ever cross paths with this provider? That means promises, promises, promises. We all at some point fall victim of making promises, and probably we've all at some time failed to fulfill the promise because we are human beings. Only God never fails at his promises. The rest of us, it's easy. But if you put this as your value, you can try to walk the path of keeping your promises, or just don't make promises. Just don't say what you're not going to do. Just don't say it. At least just do. Customers love people who do more than people who promise, I will do. People love people who actually walk in action more than those who move by promises. So promises in customer care, you either fulfill them or they'll ruin your relationship with the people that God has given you to lead, to relate with, to serve, or to interact with. Yeah? So today, that is our topic, promises. Promises are basically something that, possibilities of you doing that thing. Yeah? They are like a covenant that is going to bind you to do this thing that you have said you will do. Promises are like, I am not ready now, but tomorrow I'll be able to fulfill it. So they give you a timeline. Yeah, I will not be able to pick your calls now, but later after the meeting, I'll pick the call or I will get back to you. You know, they are like, I am not able to deliver now, but give me this period, or within this time frame, I'll be able to deliver. I am not able to give you what you want now, but I'll be in position to do it later. Now, when you commit yourself to that, to a customer, remember we are all serving at some point. When I talk about customers, I'm not only relating to people who are in the shops. I'm not only talking to people who are on that desk, maybe giving a product or in an office. I'm talking about each one of us who deals with people. Yeah. So when you are in that position, please be sure that you're going to fulfill it. Or if you fail, come back and start the journey. With this customer, tell them, I failed to fulfill this thing as I had promised, but I'm here now. I want to make it right. Yeah, I failed to come back, but I'm here now. But if not, it is wiser for you not to actually promise, especially to customers. If you're going to do it at a later stage, maybe you're going to do it, let's say, in an hour's time. It's good when you promise longer. Maybe tell them, within today, I'll have done it, so that you don't give yourself, you don't bind yourself in a limit of like 1 hour or a little space. Give yourself a longer space, which you know you'll be able to work through. And if you work through earlier than what the customer expected, you have them. You have hit the target beyond and above. And that is what we call exceptional customer care. And if you've hit the target on time, you did it good. Thank you very much. You will have this customer. If you do it late, halfway, you may not have them, or you'll have them depending on how you explain to them. But if you never do what you promised, trust me, you lose this customer. You lose the trust of this person. They'll never follow you again. So promises are key. Promises include things like, I will follow up on it. You know, have you been in a scenario and you're not able to serve this person? You don't have all the information at your desk, and you tell them, let me forward your case to someone else, but I'll still follow it up. Now, at that point, you have committed yourself. You have made a promise that even if I have escalated to the next person, I am also still in. I will follow up. Now, when you say, I will follow up, you have promised. Please do so. Sometimes you say, I'll follow up, and you never follow up. And you know, you're like, this person may come back and say, but this person you gave me has never done this. I went there 3 times, they have failed. Did you try? And you say, oh my God, for me I thought when I handed over, you were already sorted. That means you broke the promise. You never followed up. Customers don't like people who don't follow up on their case if you promise that you're going to follow it up. Then, look back in your life today and see how many promises have you made to people. Yeah? How many times have you told this person, I will do this. I will be able to come back. I'll come back at your party later, and you don't. There's quite a number of times. Now, what am I here to talk about today? You better go back and clear that path, because that means an unfulfilled promise will block that pathway. You will block it. That is why some of us, you have blocked certain places. You never pass there anymore. You never pick these calls anymore. You have blocked them in your phone book. You never cross there anymore. You cannot go back to that family anymore, because the things you promised, you have not fulfilled. Unfulfilled promises will hinder you to go back to a path that that God had opened up for you. What do you have to do? Get back to yourself. Sit down yourself and look at the many promises that you've made. Sometimes some of these promises you will never fulfill them because of circumstances, because of life, because of issues, because of timelines, because of so many reasons. But if you can go back to this person and tell them and repent and tell them, I'm sorry. I promised to give you 100,000 for your wedding and I never did it. But here I am. It's now 2 years after the wedding. Now I have come to buy you lunch. It is better than you having that image of someone who never fulfills promises. Then there's something here. Check the promises we give to the different people with timelines. Yeah? Timelines now. Someone says, I will marry you next year. That is a promise. We shall make our introduction next month. That has a timeline. We shall be coming to your home next week on Tuesday. When you make a promise with a timeline, even the customer is waiting at that timeline, and there are things they have put in place to ensure that whatever you've promised them works out. Now, when you don't fulfill the timeline, you better know that before the promises actually elapses, you can know, I am failing. I'm not going to make it. So go back there and rectify or extend the time before the real time. Have you got the thing here? What I'm talking about is when you have a timeline attached to the promise. For example, I will marry you next year in March. And when it comes to January and nothing has gone on yet and you feel, no, we cannot have it, please go back to the parents, go back to the people who are preparing for this function and tell them, I thought it would be in March, but on the look of things, I request that we postpone it to what? To June. Don't wait for March, then you go and tell them, now I've postponed. Yeah, because sometimes people have already made certain preparations. So promises, if you're going to move off the promise and it includes time and consequences, you can actually bridge the gap before the real promised time arrives. Customers don't like people who postpone like just from a blink of an eye. You promised you're going to bring the gowns that we are supposed to use in December. And because of shipping, because of weather, because of taxes, because of whatever, the products have not arrived in time. So call us, the customer, and tell us, you know, I made a promise that your material will be here by December, but from the look of things, it's already midway November, and we are still having challenges to connect with the producers. So maybe they'll arrive or they may not arrive. Create a moment for this customer to know that the promise may come to pass or it may not, so that they have an alternative. Customers love people who are straight in their promises. But sometimes you make this promise and you know it is not even going to come through. But you still, because for you maybe you needed the money, maybe you needed the service, maybe you needed the people to clap for you, maybe you need, and you really know. And probably sometimes you didn't know, but circumstances have come in there. So clear the lane. Tell us, the customers, that you know what, it has failed or it is failing, or I'm not sure. Then break the time limit so that people can work within the time. Customers fall in love with people who keep their promises. So if you're a promise keeper, people know. And there are people who will always recommend people to you. They are like, you need something, go to that one. If they told you they'll make it in a week's time, you're sure you'll have it. Have you seen people like that? And have you had other people who say, what? They told you in a week's time. That one will come after 3 months. That means people know that you don't keep your promises, and that will hinder your customer base. Now, as I'm talking about customers, I hope you're relating to the different areas that you're positioned in, yeah? So that you know how to relate with the people you are working with. Now, biblically, there's this man that challenges me with his promises. That is called David. And you find that in 2 Samuel chapter 9. David had a commitment and promised his friend Jonathan that he would actually take care of him and maybe the people around him if he gets to kingship. You know, he had a covenant with his friend and he kept the promise. Guess what? Jonathan passed on, that family, you know, passed on, and still, because of the promise that David had made to Jonathan, he kept the promise. What am I saying? He extended the promise from the first person he promised to the next beneficiary. Promises to customers. If you promised me as your customer or as the person whom you're relating with immediately, and maybe I pass on, or I leave that company, or I am no longer in the vicinity, or I'm no longer available for you to fulfill that promise, and you find someone connected to me, and you find maybe my child, and you find maybe my relative, and you pass on the promise that you did from me to the other person, you will grab customers. You'll be a magnet. You know, don't close the deal because the person you did the immediate deal with walked away or went off or didn't do that. You have an opportunity to pass on the promise to the next of kin if they are available, and if this promise can be passed on anyway. So promises should not limit you to only the person you made this promise to. You can extend it to the other customer in their lane. You can extend it to another person in the same circle. Those are all promises. So David actually went ahead and what? Picked up this young man who was in the lineage of the Jonathans, of Saul, of that family that he had promised to stand with. He picked up that man called, that name is quite hard for me to mention, Mephibosheth. I hope you've heard that name before. So he picked up that young man and said, even if you're lame, even if you don't, it doesn't feel like you qualify for this offer. This offer was not yours, but I had promised your father, I had promised your lineage, I had promised the people behind you to do it. Now that it is you here today, I am going to fulfill my promise. That guy challenged me that, you know, a promise does not die on someone whom you promised to do it for alone. It may exceed and go to the next generation. It may exceed and go to the next, you know, minister, and go to the next child, and go to the next parent, and go to the next someone in the community. And then you're like, I have fulfilled that promise. So don't be a person who is always who people refer to as that one. Is that who has told you? Hey, don't expect. Don't be in that category. That means people cannot relate with you. They cannot trust you. They cannot trust your product. They cannot trust your ministry. They cannot trust your church. They cannot trust your organization. Look here, only God's promises are yea and amen. He's the only one who does not break his promises. When he says that when you receive Christ, you become my child, yeah? That is his promise, and that is it. When he says, I will bless you, that is what he does. He does not change his promise because of his circumstances. So we too must emulate the same. Sometimes some of us make promises and we are quick to change them because this person, now I've withdrawn. I'm not going to give them my contribution. Yet you already made a promise that you're going to pay maybe 100 crates of soda. But you're like, since they've not called me, I'll not fulfill the promise. No, you must fulfill your promise vis-a-vis the person's response. Because for you, you need to clear your name. So that is something very important about promises. So today, as I wind up, look back. How many promises have you made to people, husbands, wives? You've promised each other. Marry me now when I have nothing. When I get money, I'll take you to the moon. I'll take you to, for this honeymoon. And today you have all this money and you've never fulfilled that promise. Many times we make promises to our children. When you perform well in class, I'll do this. And they have performed and you've never done nothing. Sometimes you're promising the people you're working with, when this happens, I'm going to, everyone, I'll do this for you. And when it happens and you feel like you start looking at the budgets, I had actually promised to take all of you out, but according to the budgets, I think no, I'll not make it. You have just broken a promise. So many times we've broken these promises. Go back to the people you broke the promises with and try and reconcile. Otherwise, they have closed that path. They have closed you. They cannot recommend you. And those are challenges that we face in life. But you can choose to stand straight. You can choose to be upright. Or you can choose just not to make promises and take action. How about if you never make these promises, but you're always acting? That is also a good one. But if you promise, please fulfill. And if you don't fulfill, make it up. Or if you've promised someone and they are not available and you can extend that promise to the next person, please do so. I hope you've learned something today. Let's keep our word. Let's not be people who people cannot rely on. Let's look back and correct the paths of the different promises that we've made in life. There's a time I made a promise, my story, a time I made a promise to someone that I'm going to give them some money on their wedding. And I failed to make it some time back. And years went back, 2 years later, and one day we're in a meeting and they were saying, Joy should be our treasurer. And this person laughed like sarcastically, like, ha, that one. In other words, they don't fulfill their promises. They are not reliable. And yet that's not the kind of person I am. So after that meeting, I walked to them and said, but you, doctor, what happened? How come you reacted like that? And he was like, Joy, I remember you promised us money. You didn't bring it. Hey, it was some time back after 2 years of his wedding. And he said that. He said it casually. We laughed about it. But when I went back and I started to learn these lessons, let me tell you, one day on his anniversary, actually it was their child's birthday, I went to them and told them, you know what? That time I sent a sample, I failed. But I've come with a gift for this baby and also to fulfill the pledge I made sometime on your wedding that I didn't fulfill. And I mean, sometimes you have to do that if you are going to clear your name, if you're going to build the trust from people again. So child of God, promises, promises, promises. Don't promise what you're not going to do. Promises that are fulfilled will draw customers to you. Thank you so much for watching. It was good sharing with you. God bless you. I love you. Take care of yourself.